Yeah, sure. So I guess my first step, and just by way of background, I'm the VP of community and brand at Chili Piper. When I joined the company, we had about 5,000 organic impressions, no customer marketing motion, no events motion, no PR motion. Now we get, between 1 and 3 million organic impressions just on LinkedIn every month through our company channels, our employee evangelism, and our user-generated content. We have an amazing events motion. Just last month, over 1,000 people attended our events, all director level in marketing or higher. We have an incredible customer advisory board, and we have relationships across around 24 peer-to-peer communities. So I guess where to start is kind of to define community. And for me, I'm curious, Brent, what you think about this, but for me, a community is a space, either physical or digital, where people who aren't explicitly being paid to do so choose to interact and provide value to each other, right? What do you think? Or is this a one-way thing, or are we having a conversation, Brent?
No, definitely having a conversation. I love that they choose to interact and provide value to one another. I mean, one of the things we always say is learn quicker, grow faster. Than in a really noisy environment we all
Yeah,
live in. The only way to get better is to learn from your peers, and you got to give, right? Often you got to
yeah.
give first to get something meaningful back. So I love that. Choose to interact and provide value to each other. I like that definition.
Yeah, and it's within that you have like a bunch of different types of communities, right? You have your customer communities, which generally sit within the CS org. You have your peer-to-peer communities, which generally aren't explicitly owned by anybody at a company. They're their own things because they want to remain unbiased, though. We can get into that as to whether they truly are a little bit later. You have communities focused on ideas. A great example of this is Culture Amp. They built this incredible community, not around using Culture Amp, but around espousing and evangelizing the idea that you should focus on company culture. And those are kind of the three main types of communities that I see now, but there are multiple strategies within it in terms of how you approach these folks.
Say those three real quick again.
Customer community, peer-to-peer
Yep.
community, idea-based community. Those are the
Nice.
three main communities. Another example of an idea-based community would be like women in sales, or like what Lori has, women sales pros, where the idea is like, let's make sales more accessible, and particularly sales leadership more accessible to women. And like the people who join there join because they believe in this idea and they want to strengthen each other. I thought it was interesting when you said, you got to go fast. Because it's like I had a friend who had this HIPAA compliant Slack for healthcare. They raised a great round, they were rocking it, and they were always waiting for step A to be completed before they moved on to step B. But like the modern SaaS, particularly B2B ecosystem, moves so fast that like you can't wait. And more than that, learning at the pace of experience just isn't fast enough. And that's why communities not only supercharge your brand and your employer brand, but they supercharge the way that you learn about the industry, which is really interesting. And my first experience with community, I started off as an operations manager for a 4-person company called Atrium. Then I ended up as the general manager of the community associated with them called Modern Sales Pros, where I scaled that community from 1,000 to 14,000 members, monetized it, brought in around 2 million revenue. So anyway, back to this, like the different communities. You have your 3 community types, but you also have a bunch of strategies within it. And there's also other stuff, like you could say LinkedIn would be a community. You can build community anywhere. In-person events can be a community. But basically, like
all those are true, but I love, I mean, I love this definition of choose to interact and provide value to each other, because that suggests some kind of stability, right? It
yeah,
suggests some kind of ongoing iterative game, which connects to what you just said, which we believe passionately, that if you want to supercharge the way you learn in the current environment, information dense, you got to learn from peers. You got to learn from peers that are willing to choose to interact and provide value. Doesn't mean not everybody goes to their corner. They actually spend meaningful engagement time to provide value to each other.
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, so that's definitely the case in my mind. And there's also like, buyer beware, because there are some communities out there that are not communities. Like I look at Drift's customer community as an example. Every single post ever made there gets a response from an employee who's paid to reply. right?
Yeah.
That's not a community. That's a message board that you are pretending to be a community. There are a couple metrics, and we can get into it later on like what truly defines community health, but unique posters and replies per thread are two of those. So if you're out there evaluating communities and you're like, every question gets only one response from the same consultant, even if they don't work explicitly for their community, if their goal is just this is the top of funnel for their consulting practice, like, sure, you have a community, but it's not going to be like a healthy community. It's going to be a community where people are trying to extract rather than give. So anyway,
No, keep going on this. I mean, definition of community is helpful. The types of community, keep going on when you think
yeah.
about elements of an authentic, a healthy community. Sorry.
Well, let's see. I've got stages of community health, or let me see. I can get to that. I have here. I'm not sure if this is helpful for you, but basically, and I was going to get to this a little bit later, but essentially, if you want to determine the health of a community, there are a bunch of different ways to do it. Membership growth, membership churn, new threads, post per threads, unique posters, and events and attendees are a great way to look at this. So what I'd recommend, if anyone has a community that they're building, just create a metrics harness for these six metrics here and track them every 2 weeks. That way you can see if any of your metrics go in the red. You can just take actions to kind of stimulate that community, and we'll get to that in a bit. But I was actually thinking first, Brent, and this is your show, so we can do whatever. So I would love to talk about like how you determine what community strategy is right for you.
Yep.
Is that something you want to talk about?
Please. That's great.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so it's basically like, for me, understanding your community strategy, it's so interesting. I believe this in all things marketing. But it's like, you want to know something? Just ask. Like, people are always hesitant. I was at Dreamforce the other day, and we were trying to sell to this company, and their senior director of sales was there, but I knew I had to sell to the SVP of sales. And I was like, how do you recommend I approach your SVP of sales tomorrow? And he just tells me. So it's like, that's always so funny. People try and do so much crazy stuff, but like, you want to know what communities are impactful for your business? Survey your buying committee and ask them, what communities are you in? What influencers do you follow? What communities are you most active in? What events are you attending? What conferences are you going to? What news journals do you read? What blogs do you read? What podcasts do you watch? From there, you can build yourself a pretty good idea of like who's influencing your buyers, right? Oh, I know that the buyers from the demand gen function who work for Chili Piper, a tool that doubles your inbound leads, tend to spend time in Wiz Ops, Brad Smith's excellent community for Salesforce experts, because they want to jam with other Salesforce leaders, right? Okay, cool. Now, from there, once you've mapped out who is influencing your buyers, the question becomes, how do we not extract from that community, but how do we provide so much value to those communities that our customers are in, that our prospects are in, so that it's visible where they're helping them, right? So that would be the first step. Determine your community. Maybe you need to build it yourself. I would say probably not. I would say if you're going to build your own community, ask yourself why you're building it. Is it to really provide value, or is it to stake your own claim of land? If it's the second one, then maybe that actually is not what you want. Maybe it's self-serving. Maybe that's not what you should do. People know when you're being authentic or not.
And the alternative, what you're suggesting is kind of leverage LinkedIn or leverage a known event, or that I mean, when you say don't, build your own versus what?
Well, what I would define as effective, and I know this isn't that common, is I would suggest that folks enact a cross-community evangelism strategy. So it looks something like this, where after you've mapped out all the communities that are relevant to you, what you want to focus on is this black dot here. How do I get my customers to organically engage across all these communities, or like at least quasi-organically engage in a way that provides value to the community without them being like a shill, right? So you can either build your own community, or you can try and play a role in these other communities. Chili Piper has chosen kind of a unique route, partially enabled by, just my unique role within communities. But I found all these communities when the pandemic first started, and they were reaching up like, Rev Genius, Sales Assembly, Wiz Ops, Gain, Grow, Retain, marketing operations pros. And I ended up providing them free consulting advice to help intro them to their first few sponsors, tell them how to talk through pricing, help them figure out how to drive activity. You build relationships with the founders of those communities and probably enter honestly, short-term contracts with them. So they have to prove the value. And then that's how you can kind of build an authentic interaction and relationship with them. Because it's if you already know that your customers are spending time in a certain community, why would you go ahead and build your own community doing that same thing? Your customers likely already have brand loyalty and connection, and they find identity in this other community. So it might,
Yeah.
it's not going to be a good look in my mind. And whenever I see people creating their new community, I'm like, sounds like a great marketing strategy for you. But
Yeah.
the best marketing strategy is actually helping people visibly.
Yep.
That's my belief. So anyway, let's say you figure this out and you're like, here are the communities I wanna focus on. It's this community, that community, whatever. Then you want to think about and maybe there's even a step before that where it's what's your goal for the community? Are you looking for social support? Are you looking for beta users? Are you looking for referrals? Are you looking to build your employer brand? Are you looking for product feedback? Are you looking to identify evangelists and then help drive them to meet the previous 4 stated goals? It really varies. But there are a lot of benefits you can get from communities. Educational opportunities, what we talked about. Learning at the pace of experience isn't fast enough. List access, getting access to a bunch of names that you can email in a hopefully classy way. Warm intros. That's a great one. A lot of these communities just know the VP of Rev Ops at all the companies, and they can be like, hey, Sarah, can you chat with these folks? They built up enough level of trust that they'll be willing to make those intros, especially if you're seen as a supporter of the community rather than trying to imperialize it, rather than trying to occupy it. You want to just support it. Revenue.
Yep.
Sponsorship revenue is a huge benefit to community. Community qualified leads. That's another one. It's like an SQL through community. And then best practices. So once you know what's best for you, then you can determine what community you want to be involved in and kind of how you want to be involved. And then after that, it's about building that relationship, which we can get to next. But I feel like I can pause for a second here if you have any questions.
Yeah, two kind of follow-ups. I love this idea of survey your buying committee is what you said. I mean, just ask, where are they spending time?
Yeah.
What do you suspect? I mean, you obviously very well articulated strategy. A lot of people are going to be taking steps A, B, and C on this.
Mm-hmm.
What are kind of top 3 things they might hear out of that from their buying committee? Or what are the top things to focus on? Is it specific events that people or specific user communities or?
So I think if you look at your inbound bucket, right? Or even a large percentage of your outbound bucket, because SDRs are claiming inbound leads at a lot of these orgs. I think you'll find increasingly, particularly for companies that have a well-developed revenue operations function, that the buying decision is actually being made, or the educational part of the buying decision is being made before they hit your website. So I don't believe that modern buyers, and the data would back this up, are going to a website to do research anymore. They're doing research in these peer-to-peer communities. They're asking their friends. They're having happy hour drinks and wondering which compensation software is the best. We use Spiff at Chili Piper. And that's kind of how a lot of these conversations go. So I think what you'd find if you surveyed your community is that there are more people who are active in these peer-to-peer communities than you'd expect, particularly the revenue ops function, for a couple reasons. One, that's their people, right? They speak the same language. They like hanging out with those folks. The communities are well run, so people feel engaged. But another reason is that oftentimes for some of these more specific roles like marketing ops or revenue ops, particularly in the mid-market, you can be the only person serving that function at your company. So you have an inherent need for camaraderie and connection, but also a business need for understanding how the hell to do any of this stuff. And the place to do that is in community. So I think that's what you'll find. The other thing I think you'll find is that when you survey your buying committee, if you leave it open-ended, you'll get all kinds of goodies that you never expected. they'll be like, oh, I first heard of Chili Piper on this blog. And then I went to this other thing. And then this other person told me this. And this other person told me this. So like the marketing funnel will look less simple, like see an ad, click on an ad. It's like, here are the 10 people you didn't even know were evangelizing for you that mentioned you in a call when we were talking about another tool and they were talking about how your tool interacts. I think you'll find when you survey folks that the buying decision is far less linear than marketers paint it out to be in their nice little neat funnels.
Yeah, we say that all the time, that it's no longer linear. I mean, people come in all over the place. And it's one of the reasons your whole go-to-market team's got to be aligned on value. Got to message value in the same way, otherwise you confuse the hell out of your buyers and customers. So just these peer-to-peer communities, I think what I heard is they're probably around events sometimes, like physical events or conferences or networking events. Could be LinkedIn groups, could
Slack
be
groups.
in Slack groups.
Slack groups are a big one. You have all these community softwares now, like Mighty Networks, Influitive, Mobilize. So there's some of those groups as well. But for the most part, like I believe people are so busy, they're either going to consume stuff, along what they do normally. Like an SDR might go to a dedicated website where there are other SDRs they want to hang with and log into a forum and do that. But an SVP of sales probably is not. They'll probably consume content where they're at, which means email, LinkedIn, Slack. And that's the primary area where these communities are, apart from the in-person stuff, which we're just starting to see again, and it's really exciting. But oftentimes, even these in-person communities are going to have a digital extension. So the in-person meetup of them isn't the community itself, it's a feature of the community, which primarily is housed online now. That's just how they work, I think.
And I want to just go deeper on this. I love your expression. The best marketing strategy is helping people.
Yeah.
I think I know the answer to my question, but would love to hear in your words, kind of helping people within the context of these communities means what?
Well, it depends on the community, but money talks, so there's a lot of things you can do, but it's like, let's say there's like a community out there, like there's one that we love called Sisters in Sales. It's run by Chantel George. She's awesome. And it's like, there are a bunch of things we could do. Like we have some awesome employees of color that can be vocal in that community, but the best thing we can do is just give them money. Give these communities money, but have a conversation with them explicitly. How is the money that I'm going to give you going to provide more services to your community? And then consult and advise the founders of these communities on how to go about doing that. Because like the moment of monetization is always a perilous moment for communities. Some people have done it really wrong. Like Sales Hacker, I think they didn't do it great. Like Outreach acquired them. And then as soon as Outreach acquired Sales Hacker, everyone's like, is this just the Outreach show now? And even if it's not, you kind of can dilute that a little bit. So what I love to do is sponsor communities and say, hey, what's this money going to be used for? And they'll be like, we'll use it for this. And it's like, great. That's how let's announce the sponsorship. Don't say Chili Piper's giving us money now. Chili Piper's giving us money so that we can host this in-person event, collecting 4 dozen women from around the country to elevate the profession of women in sales leadership or something like that. So that's kind of how you can help folks. The other thing you can do is like,
and Daniel, real quick, do you have a hard stop in 5 minutes, or can you go 5 or 10 minutes long?
I have a hard stop, unfortunately, but I could pick back up at 11:30 Eastern time if you'd like. So yeah, I can try and get the rest in real quick. But yeah, so it's like, give them money, elevate your voice by authentically providing value, find the customers that would benefit from this. Like there are customers whose brands would benefit from being active in the community, and the community would benefit from hearing them. Make that connection. Hey, I noticed you haven't heard of this community, Rev Genius. It's amazing. They would love to hear you participate. How can I get you involved? Hey, there's this community marketing operations pros. Chili Piper would like to cover your first year's fees in there. And then when you get your customers active in the community, you don't have to tell them, by the way, we'll cover your fees. By the way, make sure to mention Chili Piper. You can just focus on building a powerful customer relationship, and they'll kind of evangelize for you organically. So there are a couple ways to do that. But one thing I love to do a lot is try and like look where the founder of the community needs help. They asked a question. It's a really tough one. Nobody replied to it. Find a reply. Reply yourself. Find someone else who can reply. Find a way to provide value. So that's a really, really helpful way to go about it. Just providing value there. Another thing you could do is you can fund their events. You can send them gifts. You can give them love on social. You can, when someone breaks the community standards, you can join the masses and telling them, hey, this isn't the type of behavior we like to see here. But most importantly, if you're engaging with the communities, you just want to model the behavior that if everyone saw it, it would be better. Because like what you want is people are very driven by consensus, I believe. So if you can help model and norm behaviors for those communities, it's going to be worth more than like a few $1,000s, like replying to threads, following the standards, tagging things properly. People will index off that and they'll start to see you as a leader within the community.
Awesome. I just want to tick through one other thing and then we'll wrap for now. I mean, this has been really, really rich. And I usually just based on this recording, I mean, we'll write up a 750 word typically article, and then we reduce it to 450 for LinkedIn. So we have two versions, one for email, one for LinkedIn. I mean, there's so much here. I think I'll write it up over the next couple of weeks and just,
I appreciate that.
We can work from that. On the goals for community, I heard maybe 4 different buckets, and I just want to get your guidance before we kind of wrap. Kind of social, building out your social support. You said maybe that's branding, product feedback. There's a revenue motivation, potentially warm in shows, sponsorship, SQL through a community, and then there's best practices. Just learning
what
best.
I missed earlier, talent. Yeah,
talent.
Hiring is huge, particularly when even in this burgeoning recession, the employees often have the power. It's still an employee's market. So access to diverse, really talented talent is a huge thing. Because I guarantee you, like if someone knows, for example, Chili Piper, we've given hundreds of thousands of dollars to these women-run communities. People know, people talk, and they're like, this is a good place for women to work. Now we have 50% female managers. We have 50% female executives. And I am of the belief that part of that is the fact that when someone applies to work for us and they back channel something with Lori Richardson, she says, these people are legit. Like they walk the walk and they talk the talk and they give the money to the people who need it. Like we raised $38 million. We have plenty of money. Like we should give it to support the effort of empowering women. And they'll notice that and they'll want to work here. And then we'll have all these amazing badass women who do an amazing job. And that is what creates this kind of flywheel of brand.
I remember you saying that on stage. You have 50% women executives, which is remarkable in the
for sure.
ecosystem really you're in.
Yeah, and there's a bunch of other stuff I can just show you really quickly in case we want to keep it going. But like stages of community health, we could go through this. We could talk about the cardinal sins of peer-to-peer community, how they're messed up. We could talk about driving revenue through community, how to calculate ROI from community events. We could talk more about how to drive revenue through community. And then there's this also thing where it's the stages of community self-actualization or whatever. Or these are the signs of an unhealthy community. But the last thing is like, basically the highest level of actualization within a community is when you become part of the fabric of that community. And that is like very difficult to achieve. We haven't achieved it across as many communities as we'd like, but we actually even ascribe a community health score to certain communities and then take actions to ensure that not necessarily our product, but the themes that we care about are being discussed in a critical and non-biased way within it. The very last thing I'll say, and I know I have a hard stop and I'm going over, the exclusivity aspect of communities, I just hate. So I hope that folks reading this, if you're running a community or you're trying to sponsor a community, it's not, the goal of communities is not to lock out other people. It's to provide more value than anyone else out there. I think that's what a lot of people have wrong about community. They're like, all right, I want in and I want this company out. Well, like you literally just eroded free speech within your community. So like, why would people trust you? Anyway, Brent, this was so fun.
Daniel, I'm going to let you bounce. This is awesome. I'm sure there's another one, but we're going to put the foundational one together for folks that want to derive value from all your wisdom.
Thank you. It was a lot of fun.
It was a lot of fun. I appreciate the